All right, hey everybody, welcome back to class. Hopefully some of you guys are showing up right now. Welcome back, good to see you. Hopefully you're all doing really well. Today we have our last meeting before spring break. We just have to go over a little more material on epistemology, the theory of knowledge. So once 2:30 begins, once we get to class time, I'll go over as much of the notes as I can and we'll catch up a little bit. And then we'll be good to go for our little spring holiday. Hopefully you guys are all staying healthy and safe. And the class goes on in our new online format. So welcome back. We are live. So get your viewing set up, ready to go. Hopefully you're going to be comfortable wherever you're at. And same to me. We'll use this whiteboard as we did before last week. And we'll just go over as much as we can with the remaining notes on Plato and his account of knowledge, and then the philosopher Edmund Gettier and what criticisms he had of that long-standing definition or analysis of knowledge. So good to see you guys. I see we got a couple of early arrivals. We still got a few moments until 2:30, but it's really great to see a couple of you guys lining up and getting into the live stream. Welcome back, everybody. Hey, guys, I see you there. Anthony, Sean, hopefully you guys are doing well. Yeah, the cat, I don't know, she's not here right now when she's here, but she's running around sleeping or something, so she might be able to make a little cameo a little later on in the hour. No, but thanks. I'm glad you guys appreciate my cat. She's definitely a good kitty. Yeah. Yep. All right, good to see you guys. Good afternoon, all you. Hopefully you've had a nice week so far and getting ready for your spring break. Probably don't have any big getaway plans, I guess, but some of you guys might be traveling or at least just relaxing. So wish you well during your break. 2:26. So come one, come all. If you know people in the class that could be viewing the live stream, let them know to tap in, and we'll get through this last meeting before we head away. As before, we all know, I think, how the format works, but if you do have any questions, comments, or anything at all, definitely type them into the chat bar, and then I'll see your questions, and we'll go into that in real time if you have any. I'm sure that there will be a few as we go through our meeting. I'm going to shut my balcony door to kind of eliminate a little more of the noise. All right. Cool. Nice. Okay. I'm getting comfortable, getting into your viewing setup position. Welcome back. Welcome to Intro to Philosophy, Spring 2020, coronavirus edition. Cool. Getting to see some more and more people showing up. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for. So thank you guys. Important lectures on material that we all need to be familiar with for later on in the semester and just our everyday lives. Okay, 2 more minutes until we get to class time, and then I'll really start to talk to you guys. When is the next essay due? Good question, Kenzie. Well, it's due on the same date listed in the syllabus, which I can just tell you about really fast by going into my files here on my phone. So yeah, you're asking about the due date of second essay, essay 2. It's not yet been administered. I'll give you guys the prompt about 2 weeks before it is due. So during week 12 after the spring break, then you'll be given the prompt, and it'll be due on April 29th. So that's going to be the Wednesday of week 14. So that's when the second paper will be due. We've got a little bit of time before that happens, but yes. And in terms of your midterms, I'm definitely going to be done grading all those in the next couple of days. I'm going to send you guys a notification through Titanium that you can check in with me to get your score via email, and I'll send personal response to anybody that wants their midterm score. But I'm going to be finished with that grading task tomorrow night, and so I'll send the notification on Friday morning, and then anytime after that, all throughout the spring break and beyond, you can ask about your grade. I see a person who's doubling the question of Kenzie. I just said that it's due on delivered until 2 weeks prior to that, so April the 15th is when you'll get the prompt, and then April the 29th is when the second essay will be due to me. Midterms have been going pretty well. There's a variety of scores, so there's some high scores. Some people might have wanted to do a little better. You can't tell you much as an individual until I'm done with each one, but hold on and you'll definitely get your score on Friday, no later than that. But yes, thank you guys for your questions. Okay, great. So pretty much it's 2:30, so welcome back to class, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and being back here at this live stream format. So today we are trying our best to catch up a little in the notes. We couldn't have class on Monday because of the enforced rule by the university to have a non-instructional day. So that means that we didn't get to follow up on the first lecture on epistemology that we did last Wednesday. So I'm going to try and run through the remaining notes from Plato's account of knowledge that we were starting to discuss. And then after that, we will talk about Gettier and Gettier's examples that demonstrate that the classical definition of knowledge has actually got some problems with it. So if you guys want to say hi or anything, just to let me know who's here and who is viewing, that'd be awesome. Not like a big deal, but anybody who wants to just type in a quick little hello or some type of greeting, nice to see you guys. Nicole, Jeffrey, awesome. Well, anyways, yeah, tap in, let me know. It's good to have a little bit of feedback, seeing you guys there in the comments. Good to see you, Heather, Callista, Brisa, Claire, Melissa, Anthony. Okay, good. We got a good crew. Daniel, I really appreciate you guys. Thanks, Sean, Stephanie. Great. Got here, Andy, Daisy, Eduardo. Awesome. Well, okay, cool. Brandon, Bailey. Thank you guys so much. So let me get into some questions to get our minds back on the same topic that we were focused on last week. In philosophy, there's a lot of different subjects. There's the philosophy of religion. There's ethics. Another big topic in philosophy, which is our current topic for a little while, is epistemology. And epistemology, the word you see written there, it just refers to the study or theory of knowledge. So the theory of knowledge. So what epistemology is all about is analyzing and breaking down the concept of knowledge. What is human knowledge? How do we acquire it? Under what conditions do we have it? When do we not have it? What is the difference between really knowing something and just having a guess that happens to be correct? And what are some important concepts related to the whole topic of knowledge? What is truth, belief, justification? What is a proposition? What is an epistemic agent? So these are the type of questions and concepts that are of interest in the world of epistemology, a major branch of philosophy. And last week, after I told you that we would start talking about knowledge, I gave you a little brief crash course on the history of the philosophical figure Socrates and his student Plato. So not to repeat all those details again, you can go back and view the live stream that has been posted from last Wednesday. But basically, Socrates was a great teacher, an intellectual light of ancient Athens, Greece. He got into trouble for challenging the received wisdom of people that would pass by and talk with him in the town square. And this resulted in him being put up on charges for corrupting the youth. Even though the charges were kind of baseless, he was a thorn in the side of the Athenian aristocracy or government. And so what happened was he was convicted, put to death, and then Plato, one of his younger disciples, kind of continued the tradition of philosophical analysis and established the academy. Okay, we after that talked about some concepts and definitions in the vocabulary that is used within epistemology. So we spoke of what a proposition means. Proposition means the meaning of a sentence. So one example I gave you guys was if you saw two statements written, two sentences written on this board that were in two different languages, like what could it be? The snow is white versus what would it be in Spanish? Pero es blanco, or I don't know, maybe that's not the right translation, but in German, der Schnee ist weiß. What I'm telling you is that although those are spoken in different languages and they have different words or different, letters, they don't say different things, they don't mean different things. So the propositional content of a statement is just what it means. And there can be multiple surface forms of one statement, but one proposition that they all refer to. Next, we talked about what it is for a proposition to be true. Who remembers that? Anybody could quickly just tell me in the comments there, if a proposition is true, if a sentence is true, what are we saying? What does this mean when a statement is true? That it is true means what about it? So what could that mean? That something is true, that some proposition is true, has a specific meaning. Just don't want us to forget that. Knowledge is justified true belief. Yes, Soroush? But we're going very slowly. We're going to talk about each of the conditions individually first. And I'm just asking about one of them, which is the word truth. When what a proposition says matches the facts of reality. Good job, Firas. That is exactly the right information. So you could say I'm wearing an Adidas track jacket. That's just true. You can see that I'm wearing it. So that's a statement, and it matches what's happening. If I told you I was wearing a Nike track jacket, at least that's not true right now. So it's something I could say, but it doesn't match the real circumstances of reality. So true statements match the world. Next up, what's a belief? For a subject to believe a proposition, that just means that they what? That they think that it's true, okay? So I would guess that right now you don't believe that campus is open or that classes are in session on campus. Because, well, you've got a lot of information that tells you that's just not true. So whatever you think is true is what you believe. Sometimes our beliefs can be wrong and they can actually turn out to be false, but the goal anyway is to have true beliefs. And then there's justification. So for you to have justification for believing a proposition just means that you have good evidence or good reasons to believe it. And so the definition of knowledge that was given by the Greeks, now we can talk about it, Soroush, having just given you a little review of some basic terms. To have knowledge, they said, was to have a justified true belief. Okay, and I was going over some examples last time as to how this makes some intuitive sense. For example, we never give a person credit for knowing the correct answer on, let's say, a multiple choice exam if they fill in the wrong bubble. If you fill in the wrong bubble, then what your response was is not actually true. So if someone asked you, when was the Declaration of Independence signed, and you guessed 1876, that is not knowledge because it's just not true. It's not when it happened. So at a minimum, you have to get things right. You have to have the correct information for you to know. So the proposition has to be true. Of course, you also have to believe the proposition for you to be one that knows it. And in addition to that, you have to have some type of reasons or evidence in support of the belief. You can't just, let's say, guess right now that there's an even number of people in the world. And even if you're correct, we would not say that you actually know it because you haven't done any investigation that gives you good, solid evidence or grounds to believe that. Maybe another case could be the existence of extraterrestrial life. Maybe they're out there, sure, that's a possibility. I would say it's a pretty good possibility given the fact that there's so much life on this one planet here. But even if you believe it, and even if it is true, we can't say you really know unless you had better evidence. A biased juror who makes a snap judgment that the defendant is guilty on day one before hearing the presentation of arguments isn't somebody who really knows that that person is guilty, but maybe they will know it later if they listen to the evidence and it seems like it proves the case, and in fact, if that conclusion is true. Okay, so for you to know something, you got to have all three conditions met, not just one, not just two, but all three. And having gone over those little details, I'm now ready to speak with you guys in more depth about the writing that we didn't get to go into more last week, and that's the writing of Plato called the Meno. Okay, so let me just erase this little stage setting term, and then we're going to really go back over some of the basic detailed facts concerning Plato and his writing. So Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, don't want us to forget when he lived, so I'm just quickly opening my text to his pages here. So this is a man who lived from 428 until 347 BCE. And he wrote a lot of material. In most of the writings that he did, the main character is Socrates, his teacher. So he uses the figure of Socrates to deliver insights that are sometimes from his own thought and sometimes authentically derived from real conversations that Socrates had with people. The one dialogue that we're looking at for now is called the Meno. The Meno, okay? And it's called the Meno because Meno is the name of a Greek general who Socrates is having a discussion with in this little dialogue. Now, these Platonic writings, they're often called dialogues because in them there are discussions, like conversations that go on between Socrates usually and some other character or characters. They almost read in a play type format. If you've read the text, you'd notice that there will be like Socrates, and then his dialogue. And then after that speech goes on for some while, the other interlocutor is stated to have their statement, like so Meno, and then Meno's response. And it kind of goes back and forth as though you're reading the lines in a play. Well, okay, in this particular dialogue by Plato called the Meno, we hear about a discussion, a conversation going on between Plato's teacher Socrates and this self-serving Greek general whose name is Meno. Okay, so there's such a short section of writing attached to this part of the class, this one essay. It's very like 2 pages, very short, that I can basically read to you the whole thing and break it down line by line as we go over it. So I'm going to do that. If you go into your textbook or if you find it later and refer to this lecture using it, I'm talking about the essay, the Meno, which is written on page 343 and 344. So just that one little front and back page. So here's how it starts off. Okay, guys, I'm going to just walk you through this. Now, here's Socrates speaking to begin this dialogue. Here's what he says. He says this. He's talking to Meno. He says this. A man who knew the way to Larissa or anywhere else you like and went there and guided others would... Okay, so let me give you the background on what's being discussed in this opening piece of the dialogue. Basically here, Socrates has asked this question. What if somebody knows the way to a place which is called Larissa? Okay, so Larissa, this isn't the most important piece of information, but Larissa is just the name of another city in Greece. It's the name of a city in Greece that is, let me get this straight, 100 miles north of Athens. Socrates lives in Athens, and so he's talking about another Greek city 100 miles north, which back then, you know, thousands of years ago, 100 miles is a pretty significant distance to travel. All right, so he asks this question to Meno. He asks him, what if somebody knows how to get to Larissa, right? They just know how to get there. They've made the trip many times, maybe between Athens and Larissa. If they know how to get there because they've done it so much and they have that experience, couldn't they lead somebody also who's never been there, successfully lead that person to the same destination? And, you know, Meno hears the question and his answer is basically simple. Yes, certainly a person could do that. So do you guys understand the first little piece of exchange between Socrates and Meno here? Socrates just asked the basic question, if someone knows how to get to a place, and in this case it's Larissa, couldn't they lead someone there using their knowledge of how to get there? Let me make it a little more relatable to you in case that wasn't clear enough. So, I mean, right now you guys are at your home probably. Most all of us are because of this order. But take, for example, Cal State Fullerton. That's a place that you guys have been before. And therefore, I would say you know how to get there. Isn't that fair? You know how to get to Cal State Fullerton from wherever you're at now. Okay? So since you know how to get to Cal State Fullerton, question. This is the same type of question Socrates asks Meno. Do you think that you could lead somebody who's never been to Cal State Fullerton to the campus and correctly steer them to the right destination? Basically, could you like show a friend that's never been to campus how to get there? Because you know how to get there. Do you think you could? Yes, of course. Good one. Thanks, Kai. So it's not the most complex point to make. If somebody knows how to get somewhere and they've done it a lot and they have previous experience, then certainly, thanks, Alan, Soroush, Anthony, all you guys. I'm seeing you, Caitlin, Melissa. Definitely, if you know how to get somewhere, you can lead other people to the same place. Okay, good. Point taken. So Socrates continues from there. Here's the next thing he says to Meno. So he says, well, what if somebody had had a correct opinion as to which was the way, but had not gone there, nor indeed had knowledge of it? Would he not also lead correctly? Okay? And again, Meno's answer is certainly, Socrates. So this is a different question. Let's focus on this new question that he asks. Yeah, traffic sometimes does suck, right, Brian? But anyway, no need to worry about that anymore, I guess. So back to what I was saying. Second question that Meno is asked by Socrates, the second follow-up. First was, if someone knows how to get there, can't they lead someone there? Answer, yes. New question, though. What if he didn't know how to get there, but he just had a correct opinion as to how to get there? Couldn't they also lead you correctly just based off the correct opinion? Okay, now this terminology that he is using, correct opinion, what he means by this is two parts of our knowledge definition without the other part. So let's keep in mind the overall definition of knowledge that was provided here. Knowledge, they said, was equivalent to these three conditions that we have mentioned. Justified true belief. Okay, so justified true belief. Just make sure you can see that that's the letter E. Correct opinion, the term that he's referring us to now, refers to just two of those conditions. So what do you think those two parts are? Correct opinion. It's two parts out of three, but not the third one. So correct opinion, just using your overall knowledge and common sense, what two parts of the knowledge definition do you think that stands for? If it's correct opinion, this is like synonymous, or in other words, which two elements here? Because yes, true and belief, but without the justification part. Okay, so a correct opinion is, as you're correctly stating, it is a true belief without justification. So, correct opinion is when a person has a true belief, so they believe something, they think it's true, and also it is true. But it's just an opinion. It's not knowledge because they don't even have any evidence or facts or reasons to base that true belief on. Okay, so the second question that Socrates asks Meno is, well, suppose that someone does not actually know how to get to Larissa. So they don't know how to get there. They've never been there. They've never done this journey. But they still have a true opinion as about how to get there. They just don't know. So this would be like the equivalent of a person that does not know how to get to a destination, but still has an accurate map, right? Correct instructions. But the person doesn't have any real reason to trust in those directions because they've never used the map before. So do you guys kind of follow what I'm talking about? Suppose that you don't know how to get to some place, but you have a functional map that is an accurate and a working map. Wouldn't the true opinion that this map stands for be good enough to get that other person to the destination? You know, so like suppose you don't really know how to get somewhere. In the modern world that we're living in today, we don't so much deal with physical maps like made out of paper so much anymore. But what do you guys think is like a common technology or device that can be used to correctly navigate you to a place that you've never been to and you don't actually know how to get there on your own? What would that be? What technology would that be today? GPS, correct, Anthony. So like, Google Maps or whatever your preferred GPS navigation system is. Is it possible for a person to just use correct instructions given on such a device and get them to their destination correctly? And yes, again, the answer is yes, that you can still get there, even if you don't really know, and you're just going off a correct opinion, which this map represents. So having gone there yourself in the past and not just relying only on the map is like having the experience that gives you evidence that this is the correct way. But you can still use the correct directions even without that evidence that they are correct. So that's the second question that Socrates has asked Meno. Couldn't you use a correct opinion even if you don't know personally how to get there? And here's what Meno said. He said, certainly. So then Socrates goes and continues this discussion by probing him with a few more questions. He says, Socrates speaks now. He says, and as long as he has the right opinion about that of which the other has knowledge, he will not be a worse guide than the one who knows, since he has a true opinion, though not knowledge. And Meno replies to him, in no way worse, Socrates. So this exchange so far has just put this stuff on the table. First, that if you know how to get to a place, you can lead another person that does not know how to get there to the same place based off your own knowledge. Okay? After that, he asks a different question. Well, what if you don't really know, but you do have a correct opinion? Couldn't that just as well be used to correctly navigate a person to the city? And the answer again is yes. So Socrates starts to wonder, and he poses the question now. So if knowledge is just as useful as the correct opinion that is not knowledge, then what is the advantage of having knowledge? Why do people value knowledge more than just a correct opinion if they're both just as useful in getting you the result you want? You know what I'm saying? So let's ask this question and wonder about it ourselves here. What do you think? Is there any advantage by knowing how to get to a destination versus just using a GPS and having no previous knowledge about how to get there aside from the GPS? Like, what's the benefit of really knowing how to get there on your own instead of just having to rely on instructions that you've never used before to a place you've never gone before? Okay, good, Sarush. So one thing you could say is that sometimes the GPS might malfunction. Sometimes you might get into an area where coverage is weak. Maybe sometimes because you have never done this before, if there is a, let's say, fork in the road and you're not sure which direction the instructions guide you towards, you might not trust that the map will get you there. If you've done it many times, you know all about alternate routes, and so you're not like hesitant or uncertain of yourself as you go through those steps. So you might argue that having the knowledge is better than just the mere correct opinion, because based on the evidence of your previous trips, you'll always get there correctly, whereas the one with the correct opinion will only get there some of the time, right? So like a person that doesn't have to rely on the GPS is going to get there no matter what. A person that only knows based on the, well, doesn't know, but the person who only has the GPS to rely on and no other evidence might get lost along the way or have occasion to distrust the accuracy of its instructions. Okay, so that seems reasonable to me, but Socrates kind of messes with Meno a little bit by kind of questioning whether that's really true. And so here's how it goes on next. Socrates says, so correct opinion is no less useful than knowledge? And Meno now tries to give him the answer that I was just going over with you guys. He says this. He says, well, yes, to this extent, Socrates, but the man who has knowledge will always succeed, whereas he who has true opinion will only succeed at times. And then Socrates kind of doesn't let him have that, because he replies back this way. He says, well, what do you mean? Will he who has the right opinion not always succeed as long as the opinion is right? Won't you always get there as long as the GPS does in fact work? And Meno at that time seems a little stumped, and so he kind of gives in and says, well, that does appear to be true of necessity. And now it makes me wonder, Socrates, if this is true, why is knowledge prized far more highly than just a right opinion? And why are they different? Okay. And now Socrates relents and says, well, I'll just tell you. I'll tell you why knowledge is of greater value than just a correct opinion. So he says, do you know why you're wondering, or should I tell you? And Meno says, by all means, tell me. So now Socrates gives us the real explanation, according to him, of why knowledge is more valuable and more prized than just having a correct opinion. So I'm going to erase a little here to take us into the next little batch of paragraphs in this short essay from Plato. All right, so what happens next in this dialogue between Socrates and Meno is that Socrates starts to discuss a kind of cultural superstition or legend that existed in ancient Greece. So I need to tell you a little bit about what this legend was all about. There was this man who was a sculptor in ancient Greece, and his name was Daedalus. That's the name of this ancient Greek sculptor who acquired a reputation for being just the most skilled sculptor in the whole country, right? And he would make these very, very realistic renderings of human figures. And since he was so skilled and talented at doing this, a myth, a legend kind of grew around his work. People said this. They said, if you are able to acquire one of these priceless Daedalus statues, then the thing you really need to do is, once you have it and you own it, make sure to tie it to the ground with ropes. Because the rumor was, the myth was, that these sculptures, they're so realistic that if you did not fasten them, attach them to the ground with ropes, then in the night when everyone's asleep, they might just what? What do you guys think? Where do you think this legend or myth is going to go? You get a fine Daedalus statue, you better tether it to the ground with some ropes, because if you don't, this is what's likely or bound to happen. When you're not looking or whatever, these statues, if they're not attached, they're probably going to what? Let's see some guesses. I think you'll get it really fast. Yeah, right. They thought they'll run away, walk away, or whatever. They just might walk off. Yeah, because the people believe they're so realistic that they could become animate things. So you better get them tied to the ground with ropes. Okay, now let me just explain to you the point of this metaphor that he's referring us to. They said about these statues that if you got one, it's very valuable, but the value kind of is more when they're grounded by the ropes, because the ropes prevent the statues from leaving. And as beautiful as the statue is, it's the same beautiful statue, whether it's attached with ropes or not, but it's better to keep it down with the ropes, because then the thing that you have right now won't leave, and it'll stay there, and you can maintain the ownership and the possession of it. Okay, so basically the point is, these are great statues, but it's better to have them with the ropes than without. Without the ropes, they're here today, but they might be gone tomorrow. But with the ropes, they're going to stay stable, and they're not going to go anywhere. So you get to keep them. All right? Now, this becomes a bit of a metaphor, according to Socrates, because what he's saying is knowledge is more valuable than a correct opinion, in the same way that the statues with the ropes are more valuable than the statues that don't have ropes. So the basing function of these ropes with the statue is an analogy. The ropes are to the statues as what you think is to a true belief. There's something that adds stability to a true belief that prevents it from leaving somebody's mind. Just like these ropes, by analogy, prevent the statues from leaving your property, there's one of these conditions of knowledge that correct opinion is missing, but if it had this extra ingredient, it would remain in place. So what are the ropes being compared to in the knowledge definition? So let me say this, Kai and Soroush. No, well, knowledge is justified true belief. Correct opinion is just the true belief part. And so you're getting it right, Jose, Soroush, Daniel, Anthony, at this point. Yes, justification is the analog to the ropes. So why he thinks knowledge is more valued than correct opinion is because knowledge is a correct opinion with something extra on top. It's a correct opinion, but also with justification. And when you have got justification, it does something to your correct opinions, to your true beliefs, similar to what the ropes do to these statues. The justification basically prevents the correct opinion from leaving your mind, just like the ropes literally prevent the statues from leaving your property. So would you rather have the statue with or without ropes? With the ropes. It's not like it's a different statue, but the main thing is that the ropes let you keep it instead of it going away. Now, if you had a correct opinion, wouldn't you rather have that correct opinion with justification rather than without? Meaning, wouldn't you rather have reasons and evidence to base your correct opinion on? Good question, Soroush. Quick question to the side here. You're asking, is the justification part kind of like the evidence or proof? Yes. Justification is evidence or proof. A belief that is true, which is not based on any evidence, isn't something that you're likely to remember. It's not knowledge or fact that you're likely to retain. But when you have the evidence, then it stays with you forever. And that's why knowledge is more valuable than a correct opinion. So these statues, the Daedalus statues, without ropes, are equivalent by the metaphor or analogy to correct opinions without justification. Or in other words, let me just put it in the precise terminology we've used, true beliefs with no evidence. Okay, that's the statues without the ropes. They're like symbolic of true beliefs that don't have any evidence. Statues with the ropes that's equivalent to justified true belief, true beliefs with justification, or in other words, knowledge. And that's just the definition of knowledge right there. So these statues that come bundled together with ropes are better. Why? Because the ropes prevent them from leaving. And correct opinions that are based on facts and evidence that you know, the justification that you're aware of, they don't leave your mind. So let me try and really be clear about what it is that keeps your beliefs in your mind when they're based on justification or evidence. Let's go back to the example of a student who had a lucky guess and got a correct answer on a multiple choice exam. So they were asked, when was the Declaration of Independence signed in the United States? And they just don't know the answer, but they see the four optional responses. 1776, letter A. 1876, letter B. 1950, letter C. And 2020, letter D. They easily rule out D, but they have no idea which of the other dates it is. Let's suppose that they just make a random guess of A. Now, is that the correct answer in our case? You know the question. 1776, is that when the Declaration was signed? That's answer A. They fill in A, but they're just totally guessing. Is that the correct answer? It is. It is the correct answer. Now, when they fill it in, they're going to get the credit. But did they really know that answer? No. Because if you ask them, why is that the correct answer? They couldn't tell you. They couldn't say, well, here are the reasons. They couldn't supply to you all the reasons and detailed facts as to why they know that that's the correct answer. So if you gave that same student this test in 6 months, when they were guessing the first time and they got it right, do you think that they will remember the information? Will they retain the correct answer? No. But who will? The student that knows the answer, who doesn't fill it in randomly or in a haphazard guessing way, but when they fill it in, these thoughts are in their mind. I know the dates of the Constitutional Convention. I know all the major facts. I know all the actors that were involved in the incident or in the episode that we're talking about, right? So that type of person has the knowledge, but it's not going to leave their mind. They're not going to forget about it, and they're not going to change their mind about it. But until you have those facts and reasons and justifications to base your belief on, you know, you're just basically in a guessing game. And the same answer, you won't give the correct answer systematically because you're unaware of the reasons why it's correct. So let me see some of your input here. In actuality, the statues won't move. So doesn't that void the justification of the statues with ropes? Yeah, it's a metaphor, though. I mean, don't worry about the statues because obviously they don't move. You know, this is a cultural superstition. In reality, probably they were just getting stolen because they were so prized and they're so realistic when people, you know, didn't have them attached to their property. But the metaphor and the value of it stands, right? If it's the thought that having it secure and fastened is better than having it in a position where it's liable to just go away, the same thing is true of beliefs. If you have a true belief, it's good to have it. You'd rather have a true belief than a false one. You'd rather have guessed the right answer to your multiple choice question than to have guessed the wrong answer. But you won't always guess the right answer until you have the reasons that it is the right answer in your mind. that's when you fill it in confidently and full of certainty that you're not just guessing, but that you know the answer. So why is it better to be getting things right based on knowledge than just correct guesses? It's better because the justification that comes together with knowledge makes it stable, keeps it to be something that remains in your mind. When you have no evidence to base a belief on, it's something that you might forget or that you might change your mind about. Let me give you another example just from one of our earlier discussions. Say I believe there's aliens in outer space. As of today, I can't really claim that I know that. I may believe it, but there's not enough evidence to make it something that I really have clear justification for, to say that I actually have knowledge. So my mind could change about that question 10 times over the course of my lifetime. One time I'm looking at all the living things on the earth and I'm like, that's so much life, there's gotta be more out there. Another time I'm looking at the big void expanse of the universe and black holes and I'm like, man, life seems to be a miracle. I don't know how it even happened once. So I'm changing my mind. But what would make me stop changing my mind back and forth on this topic? If evidence, let's say, came forward that conclusively established the existence of non-human life out there in the universe. So if like the Mars rover started beaming back images of little green men on the surface of Mars, from that point onward, we would no longer say, maybe there's aliens, maybe not, I'm just guessing. We'd say, no, it's something that we certainly know, and now we don't flip-flop and waffle on whether we think so or not anymore. So basically, knowledge has an advantage over just a correct opinion, because knowledge goes beyond a correct opinion, which is just a true belief with no justification. Knowledge has that added ingredient of justification, and Socrates' claim is that that makes it of greater value because it does not leave your mind in the same way these ropes add value to the Daedalus statues, because by metaphor, they also don't allow the statues to leave the property. So let me read the last few passages in this short essay of Plato, and then we'll talk about some new stuff. So here's what goes on from there. Socrates says, it's because you've paid no attention to the statues of Daedalus, Meno, but perhaps there are none in Thessaly. Thessaly is where Meno is from, so he says, maybe you just haven't heard of this rumor because in Thessaly they don't know about Daedalus. Meno says, well, what do you have in mind when you say that? Socrates replies, he says, that they too run away and escape if one does not tie them down, but they remain in place if they are tied down. And Meno, a little confused, asks, so what? Socrates says, okay, well, to acquire an untied work of Daedalus is not worth much, like acquiring a runaway slave, because it does not remain. But it is worth much if it's tied down, because his works are very beautiful. What am I thinking of when I say this? True opinions. Because true opinions, as long as they remain, are a fine thing, and all they do is good. But they are not willing to remain long, and they escape from a man's mind, so that they are not worth much until one ties them down by giving an account of the reason why. And that, Meno, my friend, is, as we previously agreed, after they are tied down, in the first place they become knowledge, and then they remain in place. That is why knowledge is prized higher than correct opinion, and knowledge differs from correct opinion in being tied down. And then Meno says, yes, by Zeus, Socrates, it seems to be something like that. By Zeus, the Greek equivalent of, oh, yes, by God, that seems right. And Socrates just finishes by saying, well, indeed, I speak as one who does not have knowledge but is guessing. However, I certainly do not think I am guessing that right opinion is a different thing from knowledge. If I claim to know anything else, and I would make that claim about few things, I would put that down as one of the things that I do know. And Meno says, right on, Socrates, or rightly so. And then that's how that dialogue ends. Okay, so what I've tried to just show you guys right now is a real line-by-line breakdown of this short dialogue of Plato in which Socrates discusses the concept of knowledge with the Greek general Meno. And the basic facts about the dialogue are, it starts off with Socrates asking Meno, if someone knows how to get to a place, can't they lead someone else there? He says yes. Second question, if someone has a correct opinion but doesn't know how to get to some place, like if they're just using a map or whatever, but they don't really know how to get there on their own, couldn't they use that to get the person that's never been there to the same destination? And again, Meno says yes. Socrates then, poses this a tough question. Well, then what's better about knowledge instead of just having a correct opinion if both things can get you to the results that you want? And Meno says, well, it's probably because the correct opinion is not going to stick with you, or you will sometimes you lose your way if you're just relying on a map and you don't really know the way yourself. In response to that, Socrates gives this metaphor of the Daedalus statues. Well, the reason he says it's better to have knowledge than just a correct opinion is because knowledge comes with justification, and a correct opinion is missing that, even though it is right and it is believed. It's something that lacks evidence. And when you have the evidence and reasons, it bases the belief and keeps it from leaving your mind, just like these ropes base the statues and prevent it from leaving the property. And I'll say one last thing about this discussion here. When you use words to refer to justified beliefs, in our language, it kind of mirrors or reflects this metaphor of the ropes. Because when a person has a belief that's really, really justified, we say things like this, that it's based on something, that it's grounded by certain things. But with the ropes, right, they physically base the statue. They base it to the ground. And they also ground it, you know, in a literal way. So when we say our beliefs are grounded, well-based, we're saying something that does recall to mind the essential elements of this rope metaphor. When a belief is well-based, it's justified. And when a statue is well-based, it's tied to the ground with ropes. In both cases, that thing that secures it keeps it with you, and you'd rather it be with you if it's a correct belief or a beautiful statue than to just leave, okay? So we can come back to that topic in this essay again, you know, as we move through the semester. But for now anyways, I'm gonna erase what we've got there, and let's turn the page to another approach to knowledge. Well, what we really are gonna see next is that definition of knowledge, justified true belief. It was a powerful kind of dominant conception of knowledge for thousands of years in the Western world, from way back in the time of Plato, 300 years BC, all the way up until pretty recently, the 20th century. But in 1963, okay, of all years, there was this man, this American philosopher named Edmund Gettier. Okay, Edmund Gettier in 1963 wrote this very short but extremely important, and some people consider revolutionary paper, that basically eliminated or undermined the classical definition of knowledge that I just taught you guys, that had been with us for thousands of years. In literally like just a 2-page essay, this man gives some examples which show that the old school classical account of knowledge is not actually fully complete, that it's inaccurate in some sense, or that it requires further analysis. So basically what I'm telling you is that this American philosopher in 1963, literally thousands of years after Plato, discovered some examples which show that justified true belief is not actually enough in every single case for a person to have knowledge. So it shows that the basic definition of knowledge is not correct. And that leaves us now still wondering today, what is the correct account of knowledge if it's not justified true belief? So Gettier is going to try and help us understand why this old definition of knowledge does actually still have a few problems. And his paper is called, "Is Justified True Belief Knowledge?" So the title of his paper is a question. The question whether or not justified true belief actually is knowledge. Is that the right definition? And you know, spoiler alert, Gettier is going to say no. It's not actually the right definition of knowledge. Something's wrong with this definition. It's incomplete. Okay, so we have to dig into the examples given by Gettier. These are very famous examples. A lot of people that study epistemology or focus on that topic, they call these things Gettier cases. They become so well known in the literature that that they've acquired their kind of own term of art. Gettier cases are scenarios, hypothetical scenarios, once again, that illustrate the possibility of having a justified true belief that is not knowledge. And that just destroys the whole equation. Because if this analysis works by means of these examples, what he's showing you is that knowledge is not equal to justified true belief. Not equal. So let me get to the reasons why. The first thing he says in his paper, and you'll find the paper on page 345 and 6 of the book, he lays out 3 different equivalent variations on the definition of knowledge. I don't want any student to get too confused by this, because it's not that he's giving 3 different definitions. He's giving 3 synonymous accounts of the same definition. So there are terms that are synonyms for justification, truth, and belief. Here's one way that he puts it on that page. Sorry. So take this, for example. This is just one formal definition or account of the classical account of knowledge. So S, some epistemic agent, that's just a letter that stands for some agent or other. S knows that P is just a letter which stands for a proposition of any type. So this could stand for, you know, John knows that the sky is blue, or any sentence. P is just a placeholder for whatever the item is that we're investigating. And S is just a placeholder for whoever the person is that fits into this analysis. So S knows that P, just in case the following three conditions are met. Just in case, number one, P, the proposition, is true. Number two, S, the subject, believes that P. And three, S, the subject, is justified in believing that P. So you'll see him provide the account of knowledge on page 345 in this manner, where he simply uses the Arabic numerals here to stand for the three conditions. So a subject S knows a proposition P just in case the following three conditions all hold. First of all, the statement is true. Second, the subject believes that. And three, the subject is justified in believing that. So as an example, I don't know, you, I guess, know that Trump is the president because, first of all, that is true at this time. I take it that you think it's true, and you have all types of reasons for believing that. For example, just watching the news, reading the newspaper, or anything else. So you've got knowledge of that proposition based on this and many other things. There are two other various statements of the definition of knowledge that he also provides there, but they're not different definitions. For example, let me read you another one. Below, another way of putting it is this. S knows that P, just in case S accepts P. Number two, S has adequate evidence for P. Number three, P is true. Okay, so let me just quickly test your knowledge. The condition which says S accepts P, which of them do you think that is equivalent for among the three conditions of knowledge? S accepts P is just another way of saying what about S? What? That believes, correct. Thanks, Sarush. Yeah, so accepts is just another way of putting the idea that someone believes something. To say that S has adequate evidence for P is just the same kind of thing as saying what? Adequate evidence. So accepting P is what we would talk about for belief. Adequate evidence is what we would talk about for what? Adequate evidence is justification. No, adequate evidence is not the same thing as something being true. There could be things that are true that nobody can prove, like, I don't know, a dead body somewhere that someone's hidden and no one knows about it. There can also be things that are false, even though persons have justification for believing them. So when a thing is true, it just means that the sentence corresponds to the facts and reality. But back to what I was asking, the alternative formulation is S accepts P. That's just another way of putting the second condition. S has adequate evidence for P. That's another way of putting the justification condition. And P is true. Well, that's the same exact wording as the truth condition. So all we're saying here is that there are different philosophers who state the definition of knowledge in various ways, but they all basically amount to the same thing: a truth requirement, a belief requirement, and an evidence requirement. So don't just misunderstand that. If you read the text and you read page 345, I don't want you to think that he's laying out three different definitions of knowledge. He's just saying that there are a couple of different ways that people put the same definition. for our purposes and to just remain as efficient as possible, we're going to just think about it in the terms stated here. Justified true belief. Okay, so first off, he just lists the definition of knowledge that he's going to critique and try and provide objections to. So that's the first move, just stating what the definition of knowledge is. Okay, so he puts it on the table. After that, the next thing that he does is he mentions that it's possible to have a justified false belief. So just another point here. It is possible to have a justified false belief. Now, obviously, usually if your beliefs are justified, then they will be true because evidence usually leads you to the truth. But it's not foolproof. It's not that it's impossible to have a justified false belief. It's possible, it's just not as likely. So let me ask you for some quick examples maybe, if you can think of one. What could be a situation where a person would have a justified belief, but it's not true? Can you think of any real or even just imaginary case of a person forming a belief with good reasons and evidence, but nonetheless the evidence was misleading? So although it seemed like that was true based on the evidence, not actually true. Could there be a justified false belief? What do you think could be an example like that? Anybody who could just dream one up, either real or hypothetical. Justified belief, but false. Any thought? Hoaxes? Okay, good. You know, so you saying Sarouche hoaxes. Suppose that there was an elaborate hoax that was being pulled off. Like, I don't know, how about this? Someone's trying to play propaganda, another good one, Anthony. Yeah, so, you know, propaganda could be disseminated in the media by some kind of failed state. And the people that read the news reports would believe the information because it's given through official channels, but it would be false, you know. So if there was a dictator somewhere that was trying to prevent public knowledge of a scandal and had the newspapers report something other than that, then the readers of the newspaper could have a justified but false belief about that information. Imagine that someone was framed for a crime they didn't do. You know, evidence is carefully planted and arranged so that when investigators arrive, they will reach the conclusion that so-and-so is guilty. But if the person's being framed, then that's just a justified belief, but it's not actually true that they're guilty. Okay, so anyway, just understand that justification sometimes can be regarding beliefs that are not actually true. Most of the time, justification leads you to the truth, but sometimes evidence can mislead and lead you with a justified but false belief. Okay, so two things have been stated so far by Gettier. Number one, just repeating the definition of knowledge here, okay, from Plato and others. Then just mentioning this fact that it is possible, although not altogether likely, but it is possible to have a justified false belief, okay? Singular rather than plural. Thank you, guys. Just notice that. To the next point then, made by Gettier. I'm going to erase the panel, and we'll go into the next piece of the notes. Okay, so the next point that he makes requires us to get a little technical. We just have to comprehend an important principle in logic and in epistemology, which is sometimes called the closure principle. Okay, so here's what it is, the closure principle. Now, when I write this out at first, admittedly, it's going to look a little bit technical and wordy, but just hang in for a moment and bear with me, and I'll try my best to really bring it down to earth for you. Okay, so here's what it says. So if a subject S is justified in believing some proposition P, and, okay, that proposition P entails another proposition Q, and S, the subject, deduces Q from P. Then, in that case, S, the subject, is also justified in believing that Q. Okay, so that's the closure principle. We have to think about this by getting into the topic of what entailment means. Okay, so let me try and help you guys understand the concept of entailment. I think that it's a concept that might be already in your mind somewhere, but I'll just try to refresh your memory about it a little. So if one thing entails another, if one fact entails another, what do you think that means about the logical relationship between these two facts? So if A entails B, what do you think? That means that if A is true, then what about B? If A entails B and A is true, what can we deduce? What does entailment mean? So, you know, let's get into our minds for a minute. What do you think it means to say A entails B? It means that if A is true, then what about B? Doesn't mean that it's equal, Sarush. No, we're not talking about math, equal equivalence. We're talking about logic. So if A is true and A entails B, then B has to be true as well. Okay, so let me give you a couple examples of that. Today, no, it's not that it's not that it backs up B because it's not an evidence relation. It's an entailment relation. It's about implication. Let me give you some examples, and I think that will bring it out a little bit more. Okay, I'm telling you some facts right now. So one fact is that I was born in the 1980s, and I'm still alive today, and it's 2020. So if a man was born in the 80s, that entails many things. But what is one thing that does logically imply? If Vulic was born in the 80s, that entails, among other things, give me one thing that entails. If I was born in the 80s, we could say something about me that must be true. If it's true that I was born in the 80s, anybody born in the 80s, this is true of them today. So what is it? A man born in the 80s, it entails that what? Let's see a guess. It does not imply that I'm about 40. What year, but it does imply something else. You're saying that it implies that I'm in my 30s. And yes, it would have to, right? Because if I was born even on December 31st of 1989, then today I would still be 30. Sarush, millennial, I don't know. What's the earliest date of birth of a millennial? Some people might say that if you're born in 1980, you're not. Maybe you're Gen X at that point. Maybe if you're born in 89, some people would throw you into the Gen Z. Probably not, though. That's a little bit too old for Gen Z. So I was going to go with the age number, right? Let's focus on that for a moment and make it really obvious. A person who's born in the 80s, like me, doesn't that entail that I'm older than, let's say, 25? Again, Sarush, though, the Cold War ended in 1989. You're not thinking clearly enough about how someone who says they're from the 80s could have been born on the last day of the 80s. Okay, so it doesn't mean that you're alive in 1981 or 1980 to have been born in the 80s. But, you know, you would have, I guess, at least been alive during a time period in which some of the Cold War was happening, although in 1989 is when the Berlin Wall fell. So if I was born in the 80s, which I was, it entails, among other things, that I'm older than 25, okay? If you are right now in California, does that entail that you're in the United States? Question. Being in California, does that entail that you're in the United States? If it's true that you're in California, does it have to be true that you're in the US? Yes, of course, because all parts of the state of California are within the larger jurisdiction of the US. Okay, so good. I just wanted to stop there for you guys to help you understand the basic idea of entailment. And now that we do understand that, okay, let me put the definition here very clearly. If A, some statement, entails B, then if A is true, B must also be true. So, like, I mean, you're a student at Cal State Fullerton, that's true. Does that entail that you applied to Cal State Fullerton? Sure. Don't you understand that, right? Because for you to be a student today, if that's true, and it is, then it cannot be false that you applied, right? It must be true that you applied because only those that did apply can be students. Now, say someone applies to Cal State Fullerton, does that entail that they get in? No. But if you got in, of course you applied. All right, so now anyway, looking at this principle, here's what it is saying. It says, if a subject is justified to believe one thing, all right, but then they notice that that statement logically entails a second one, then if they, in using deduction, deduce that second statement from the first one, then they are also justified in believing the second entailed proposition. Okay, so for example, based on what I've told you guys just now in the past 10 minutes, are you justified in believing that I'm born in the 80s? You, the student. Are you justified in believing that Professor Vulich was born in the 80s? Do you have reason to believe that? Let's see what you say. It's pretty clear. Yes, you do have that reason. What is your evidence? What is your evidence that this man speaking to you was born in the 80s? What's the evidence? What is the evidence that you have? So we got that, good. We've established that you've got a reason to think I was born in the 80s, but what is the reason? Just based on what? It's pretty straightforward too. Yes, I told you, you heard it straight from me. So when the man tells you that, you have no reason to think he's deceiving you. Therefore, you're justified to believe I was born in the 80s. Now, I told you that me being born in the 80s entails many different things, but one of them is that I have to be older than 25, right? So the 80s, and then you, let's say, just think about it logically, and you're like, well, if he is born in the 80s, I mean that, and he's still alive today, then logically speaking, he must be older than 25. I mean, that entails that he's older than 25. So all this is saying is that when you do something like that, you have justification for believing one statement, and then you notice that it logically implies a second one. That just shows that the justification transfers over to the second statement. So whenever you're justified in believing one thing, and then you notice that that logically implies a second thing, then you are also logically justified in believing the second thing too. Because if the evidence of the first thing was good enough to justify it, of course it's the same good evidence that justifies anything which is a logical consequence of it, right? So for example, I'm born in the 80s, maybe you're born in the 2000s. That's true. From the conjunction of those two facts, it is entailed that I'm older than you. And since you're justified in believing that both I'm from the 80s and you're from the 2000s, you're also therefore justified in believing something that follows from that, which is that I'm older than you. Okay, so all it says basically is justification for one thing carries over to anything that is a logical consequence of that first proposition. Okay, so now, with these preliminaries in mind, first of all, the definition of knowledge. Second of all, that a false belief can be justified. And third of all, this closure principle. Now we're finally ready to go and discuss Gettier's cases. Okay, so there's these two Gettier examples that are really well known, and they're from this essay. So we're going to talk with you guys about case one for a moment. And again, what's the point of the cases? The examples are given by Gettier to try and show that justified true belief is still not enough for knowledge in every case. So here's Gettier's case one. And this case sometimes has come to be known by a little label, Smith and Jones job hunt. Okay, so this is a hypothetical scenario, right? And it's totally not realistic, but the point is simply to display some concepts about knowledge to the reader. So never mind the kind of weirdness of some of the aspects of the example. In the example, we have a couple of different characters. So there's Smith and there's Jones. Let me put them up here. Smith and Jones, okay? Here's what they're doing. Smith and Jones are two people that are competing for a job. There's only one position open, so only one of these two people is going to get the job, and the other person is going to have to look for, a position somewhere else. Now, they're the two finalists, so they're the last two, and one of them is going to get the job, but not both. Suppose that they're, at the site of the job interview, and they both conducted their interviews with the boss. Here's the boss. Smith, Jones, boss. Okay, so Smith and Jones have interviewed for the job, and Smith has a certain belief. Smith has formed a belief in his mind, and he has a good reason to believe it. So let me tell you what it is by giving a little thought bubble here. I'm going to make it a little bit, few dots over here so I have more space to draw the belief. Okay, so in Smith's head is this belief. It's the belief that Jones will get the job, and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. I know it might look a little small, but what it says inside the bubble is Jones will get the job, and Jones, the other guy, has 10 coins in his pocket. So Smith believes this right now, and let me tell you exactly why he believes it, okay? Because that's part of the essay. He believes this because after the interviews were conducted, the boss had a private moment with Smith while Jones was, I don't know, going to the bathroom or something. And he goes over to Smith, and the boss says this to him. He says, "Hey, Smith, I'm just going to tell you something. I don't want you to leave yet because I kind of want to make this formal when he gets back. But I'm sorry to break it to you. I've decided I'm going to hire Jones, not you. I'm going to hire the other guy. So just letting you know, I'm going to give the job to who? To Jones." That's what the boss is telling Smith, right? And then after the boss leaves and Jones comes back, Smith, he's really weird, right? And he has this weird question for Jones. Smith asks Jones this. He says, "Hey, buddy Jones, I got a question. How many coins do you have right now in your pocket?" And Jones is like, "What? Let me check." And Smith says, "Well, actually, hold on. I'm going to count them." All right. So I know it's weird, but he's like, he counts the coins in Jones' pocket and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Awesome. Thank you. You have those back. Just wanted to know. So he counted them physically. Smith counted Jones' pocket coins. So based on those two things, the boss talking to Smith and telling him he's hiring Jones, and second, that Smith physically counted the coins in Jones' pocket, he's now developed this belief. What belief? That Jones will get the job, and second, Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Now, Smith, let's suppose, is a fan of logic, and he knows all about the stuff we talked about involving entailment. So let's call this proposition D. Proposition D logically entails a very similar statement here, which he calls E. And E is identical to D with just a slight difference in the way that it's worded. It omits the name of Jones and replaces it with a generic label, the man who gets the job. So E is written as follows. It says, here I'll create a little more room at the very bottom so that it's a little easier to read. E says, the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Okay, so let's think about some things involving the case as we're seeing it right now. First of all, is Smith justified in believing D? And I think we went over that, right? Is he, yes or no, justified in believing that Jones will get the job and Jones has 10 coins? Does he have reason to believe that? Yes, he does. I'll just tell you right now, he does have justification for believing this. What is his justification for believing that Jones will get the job and that Jones has 10 coins? What are his reasons for believing that information? He is justified. Good job. Yes, guys. And the specific reason that he has the justification is, first of all, he's got a good reason to think Jones will get the job based on the fact that what? Just the part about Jones getting the job is based on what justification? What's his reason for thinking that Jones is going to get it? He has to have a reason. So what is the reason that he thinks Jones will get the job? The boss told him so. Good, Melissa. Right. It's just he heard it from the boss that's going to hire. and he has no reason to suspect that he's being dishonest, so he would have reason to believe Jones gets that for that reason. Why does he have evidence that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket? And that's even more obvious. It's because he counted them. Okay, so it's hard to get better evidence than that. So overall, D is justified for Smith. Now, the closure principle kicks in. Smith notices that D logically entails E, because if it's true that Jones will get the job and Jones has 10 coins, then it must also be true that the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket, because Jones is that man. Okay, so he logically deduces E from D, and according to the closure principle, since he was already justified in believing D, boom, now he's also justified in believing E. So all of this lead up was just to get us to understand the reasons that in this hypothetical, Smith arrives at a justified belief in the statement here, specifically worded as follows, that the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. He's justified in believing that because it is entailed by D, and the evidence that he has for D is the same evidence that transfers over to E, namely the boss's testimony and the physical act of counting coins. Now, at the end of this scenario, which we've finally gotten to now, there's a little twist. There's like a plot twist. And in every Gettier case, something like this happens at the end, where the proposition of interest turns out to be true, and it is justified, and the person believes it, so it's a justified true belief. But the problem is that it turns out to be true for a reason that the individual was not basing their justification on. Okay, so here's how this one goes. The boss comes back after Smith counted Jones' coins and so on. Sarouche, question from Sarouche quickly. So this entails that any man who has 10 coins will get the job. No, it entails that the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. He's referring to Jones as the man who gets the job and who has 10 coins in his pocket. There's no reason for him to believe that anybody who has 10 coins will get the job, because he has no knowledge about the distribution or content of anyone else's pocket. It's not as if having 10 coins in his pocket is something that causes the boss to hire him. The boss doesn't know anything about anyone's pocket coins. He's just basing the belief that Jones will get the job on boss telling him that, and he's basing the belief that Jones has 10 coins on the act of counting. Let me get back to the twist here at the end. So we've heard how it starts. They both came to the interview. They both got interviewed. Afterwards, boss told Smith, I'm going to hire Jones, not you. Additionally, Smith counted Jones' coins and saw there were 10. So he arrived at his justified belief that Jones will get the job and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket, from which he deduced that the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Now the boss comes back into the waiting room, and he walks right past Jones with an extended hand out. Well, nowadays we don't do shaking hands, I guess, but imagine he walks straight past Jones over to Smith with his hand extended as though for a handshake, and he says, hey, Smith, old boy, I was just kidding with you, man. I was playing. You really believed me, right, when I said I was hiring Jones? Well, look, I'm being honest with you now. I just kind of sometimes like to see how people react to stuff and, get a rise out of them. Earlier when I said I was going to hire Jones, I was just playing. In fact, congratulations, Smith. You're the hire. I've decided on you. You're going to start tomorrow. So Smith's excited, right? He got this job. Not Jones like he thought. But now, Smith reaches into his own pocket after that. And just it's a total coincidence because he had no idea how many coins he was holding. But just based on random coincidence, it just turns out that Smith also happens to have how many coins do you guys think? Smith, against what he had thought, gets the job himself. And you're right, Jose, as it turns out, he randomly has 10 coins in his own pocket. So let's go back to the proposition believed by Smith. What was it? That the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Now, did that turn out to be true? Proposition E. Did it turn out to be true that the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket? Yes or no? Is that true in the end? The man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. It is true, Alan, yes. Why? Because who got the job in the end, actually? It was the man named, wait for it, the guy who got the job in the end is, we know this, it was Smith, that's right. And how many coins does it happen to be that he also has in his pocket? He has 10. Now, did Smith believe that the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket? Yes, he believed that. And we already gave the reasons that he was justified in believing this. And it also turned out to be true. So look at proposition E. It's actually, in the end, a what? A justified belief that is true. So it looks like it satisfies the requirements of the knowledge definition. But here's the big point that Gettier's making. Although Smith has a justified true belief in this statement, it's not something that Smith actually knows, because it's just a random coincidence that the belief he formed using that evidence turned out to be true in the end, right? Because if Smith himself had any other different number of coins or no coins at all, then the proposition that he believed would not have turned out to be true. So it's just kind of like a random lucky coincidence that the belief, which was based on information about Jones, ended up leading to a correct proposition, but in reference to he himself. So nobody would think that Smith, under these circumstances, actually knows that the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. And that just demonstrates that in some cases, a justified true belief is not knowledge. In cases like this, where you had a good reason to believe something and it turned out to be true, but the reason that it turned out to be true is unrelated to your evidence. Now, we're going to end in a minute, and I know we're getting to the class time. We're going to add a few comments on this, and I'm going to send you guys a little video, YouTube video that discusses the Gettier problem, and it has some helpful visual aids to assist in your understanding of this and the other Gettier cases. But let me just give you one more quick one. This is from real life, okay? So I drive a black BMW car, right? It's kind of a color and model that a lot of people have. So one time, not too long ago, I was looking for my car where I parked in a parking lot. And I kind of vaguely remember the aisle, but I was a little lost. And when I went up to this one parking aisle in the lot, I saw a car which was a black BMW, and I thought, oh, my car is in this aisle. Okay, so at that time I believed what proposition? My car's in this aisle. And did I have reason to believe that? Yes, because I'm seeing the same appearing car. Okay, now maybe you can see where this is headed. I walked close to that car that I saw in the aisle, thinking it to be mine. But when I got up close enough, I realized, oops, this is actually an identical make and model that someone else owns. It's not my car. But what did I notice in the next stall over, right behind it, in the same aisle, but which I did not see at first? I saw which car, you think? I mistakenly stumbled upon which one? If you're following the little anecdote, we're just going to close with this. So I was looking for my car. Good, Virus. Good, Jeffrey. I was looking for my car, and I saw a different car that looked just like it. Using that visual evidence, I came up with the belief my car is in this aisle. Now, when I walked close to that other car, it wasn't mine. But despite that, my car was in that aisle, just two cars behind it in the same line. So would you say that my belief that my car was in that aisle was true? Was it true in the end that my car was actually in that aisle? Just want to make sure this comes out clearly to you guys. The example, yeah, it actually was. And did I have a justified reason to think it was in that aisle? Well, yeah, I did. It was just that my justification was based on me thinking it was a different car. So even though I had a justified true belief, do you think it makes common sense to say that I knew my car was in this aisle? Probably not, right? Because I was basing it on visual information derived from a different car. So I ended up having a true belief, and I had reason to believe it. But no one would think that I really knew my car was in that aisle, because the evidence that I was basing my belief on was unrelated to the actual fact of my car being in that aisle. So in any case where you're led to a true belief with good evidence, but the fact that makes the belief true is unrelated to that evidence, then that could be another example of like a Gettier case, you know? One more case that I've read about in the work of Robert Nozick is this. Suppose someone was on a bunch of drugs hallucinating and they think they're seeing an elephant in front of them, but this is just a hallucination. So right then and there, they think there's an elephant in this room. Now suppose that in a sectioned off part of the room, behind a wall that they can't see, there actually is a baby elephant there, but they're not looking at it. And it's like totally quiet and asleep, so they have no evidence that it's there. What was their belief? That there's an elephant in this room. And did they have justification for it? Well, I guess, you know, the hallucinatory image is some kind of evidence, yeah. But would you claim that they had knowledge, even though their justified belief was true? No. It's not knowledge, because though it's true, the fact that it's true is based on the real elephant that they don't see. And the justification they have is based on the hallucination elephant, not the actual one behind the partition, or the right evidence. So with these examples, we see something important, as weird as some of them may be. The larger issue they're pointing us towards is that we still don't have a fine-grained account of what knowledge is. We still don't have a fully formed conception of knowledge. And that's something in a way that's disturbing, because it's such an important idea. And we say knowledge is power, and knowledge is, you know, what separates us from other animals, but we're still kind of lost in a way, even to understand what the word knowledge means. And so it's also kind of weirdly meta, because when we say we don't know what knowledge is, then we don't actually have an understanding of what the thing is that we claim not to have when we say we don't know it. But anyways, guys, I'm going to leave you with that, and let me just repeat that I'm working through your midterms, and they'll be done no later than Friday morning. So I'll send you a titanium announcement Friday morning, and then after that, all through the spring break, anybody can message me an email, and I'll give you guys your score. And if you want, I can send photocopy of the written comments and marks on any individual's exam form. Okay, so I'm going to sign off, guys. Thank you so much for hanging in there. We went a little over time, but we'll continue on the same topic when we get back from our break. So hopefully you guys enjoy your break, stay healthy and safe. And I'm signing off for now, but have a good one. And let me know anything you have any questions about via email. Okay, take care.